her thoughts and insights on what's happening in this area, both inside the US and outside. So stay tuned for that. Hello. Our next guest has built her career around a question that can be slightly awkward at gatherings like Davos. Who holds the powerful to account? And what happens when they're not held to account? She's Kerry Kennedy, who is a lawyer, human rights activist, and president of the Kennedy Human Rights Centre. She has spent decades defending basic freedoms in countries around the world and in her own home country of the United States. Kerry, welcome. I want to ask you first about the United States. You have been a vocal critic of President Trump, who is, of course, due in Davos this week. If he was sitting here on the sofa between us, what would you say to him?
Well, I would say the greatest strength of our country is our democracy and our people. And we need to be full communities, and we need to treat people with dignity. And so any policies that advance dignity are good, and any policies that harm dignity are bad. So that's why we need to give people medical care, Medicaid, give poor people who don't have anything to eat, make sure that they have food stamps. But on a larger human rights scale, voting rights, very, very important, which have been denigrated. The attacks that are so vicious on immigrants and those who are defending immigrants are extremely dangerous to our communities, to our country, to the future of the United States.
Yeah. Now, the Centre has something like 27 lawsuits against the Trump administration at the moment. What are they mostly based on?
Most of our cases fall into two categories. So they are anti-Black and brown prejudice in policing, and they are discrimination and harm done to immigrants while in detention. So we have about a dozen lawsuits of women and others who have been sexually assaulted in detention centers. We have many, many cases of people being denied right to medical access in detention centers, things like that.
Yeah, yeah. And what about in relation to ICE itself? You know, it's become such a big issue in the last, well, this year really.
Well, we see what the ICE killing of Mrs. Good just this week, and the reaction of the Trump administration to vilify her or her family or her widow. You know, it just goes on and on.
But when you look at the last year of the Trump administration and the enormous changes that have been happening, do you get the sense that the US is on a one-way trajectory here, or will it return to what we considered as sort of something like situation normal once Mr. Trump's term ends?
Well, I think the damage they're doing now is extreme. You know, for the first Trump administration, it was so hectic and disturbing. But then Biden came in, and he couldn't have been more solid and more returned to the norm. But now the destruction of norms, both domestically and internationally, are really very dangerous. I mean, Trump pulled out of 60 international organizations last week. That doesn't re-up overnight. The destroying of our of USAID, hundreds of thousands of people have died already as a result of that. Now we're going to have 4 more years of it. You can't just go out and rehire people overnight who are going to be able to step into those roles and take care of the people who are most in need. But the thing that I think is most destructive is the destruction of the liberal world order, which is really at risk now. The fact that the President of the United States sent kidnappers in who took out a sitting head of state last week in Venezuela. It's extremely dangerous. Now, Maduro was an illegitimate leader who perpetrated crimes against humanity, against his own people. But still, we have to take care of this through the rule of law, not through blatantly illegal means, which he's done, and then the threatening of Greenland and the increase in tariffs against, a dozen countries that are protecting Greenland. It's really dangerous.
Yeah, well, looking ahead, we'll have the midterm elections in November. Everybody is expecting the Democrats to regain control of the House. What happens then?
Well, I think then you have another voice that is, and some more power that is going to be able to slow down at least some of the damage that's being done.
Yeah.
But this isn't, we're a human rights organization, so we're not about one party or the other. It's about the government. What is the government doing? Are they in compliance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or are they not? And what ways is that impacting the people of our country and people around the world? And that's what we're holding them to account for.
Yeah. And when you look at what's happened in the US now, do other countries that have slid more towards, some people would say authoritarianism,
Yeah.
but
most definitely.
but how would you categorize the shifts that we've seen in the US, and how would you compare them to other countries?
It's clearly a shift towards authoritarian rule. Let's be very, very crystal clear about that. I've been working in this field for 45 years. The first place that authoritarians go after are the journalists and the opposition political figures and the human rights activists, anybody who's criticizing the government. We've seen all of that by the Trump administration in a way that has never happened before. Then they blame marginalized groups like women's activists, like immigrants, and small minorities within a country. We've seen all of that. Shakespeare has that famous line, "First thing we do, we'll kill all the lawyers." He went after all the law firms. Why? People joke about that line, but it's really because that's the only way that authoritarianism can survive, is if you get rid of the lawyers. So that's what he's done, and the intellectuals at the universities. So I think there's so much evidence of that.
It's interesting, when there was the conflict initially with those prominent law firms and academics after that, it was interesting to see who did and didn't criticize the president. And it's been particularly interesting, I think. In fact, I wrote a column about this week, just to see how many chief executives of very large corporations who in his first term didn't really have any hesitation about criticising things that they thought that where he'd overstepped the mark, or if they didn't like what he was doing. This time around, it's really quite different. Why is that?
Well, I think there's a sense of vengeance and of weaponizing the Justice Department that we didn't see to such an extreme extent before. But, I think that there's a lack of courage among the CEOs. These are the richest and most powerful people on earth, and they are not standing up. Why not? They know that their corporations in the long term need democracy in order to function and flourish. Democracy and financial services, financial futures go hand in hand together. And they need to stand up, and they're not. So I think they need to all take a course in courage.
I guess a lot of business people I've spoken to say, well, look, what is the point? We'll just be targeted. We won't achieve anything. They're pretty fatalistic about their ability to affect any change. And they just say, I might feel good for a day or so, but then, everyone in my company won't feel so great when the share price tanks because we miss out on a big contract, or we get punished in some other way, or at least, you know, our competitors are rewarded,
Well,
all of the other.
It's not that I disagree with them on that, but I think look what the foundations did in the United States. 800 foundations band together as one and said, you hit one of us, you hit all of us. And that was effective. All of the civil rights groups band together, and that's been relatively effective.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty incredible. The CEOs of those corporations pull it together, band together, and say, you hit one of us, you hit all of us.
Yeah.
That's what they need to do. The law firms didn't do it at first, but then when they started to, they were effective. The universities didn't do it at first, and they, you know, and they all just folded. But when they band together, they were stronger and more able to resist. So I think that's what they should do.
Yeah, yeah. And just looking ahead to 2028, we're already seeing a lot of potential Democratic presidential nominees emerging. Is there anyone that you think is likely to be particularly strong, and someone that you might even throw your own weight behind?
Well, as the head of a human rights organization, I can't throw my weight behind anybody, but I have to say I went to the Democratic Convention last year, and I was so moved. I mean, I've gone to every one since 1972, so I've spent a lot of time at Democratic conventions. This year, more than any other time, I felt every day thrilled and excited by the breadth and the depth of the field. So I think there are a dozen governors and a dozen senators who, each of whom would be potential presidential nominees, and any of whom would be so much better than what we got now.
Yeah. And just looking at your work around the world, outside the US, when the US is taking up so much airtime and so much attention of other leaders, what are we missing? What are the conflicts, or what are the problems? What are the human rights issues that you're working on at the moment that are really not getting the attention you think they deserve?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, one thing that is being talked about a lot here in Davos is AI. And that's being talked about at every conference like this everywhere in the world. But what's not really being addressed is the human rights implications of AI. The questions around using it for policing functions and how that's targeting marginalized communities more than others. The use of AI in hiring practices, and now that's marginalizing women in particular. The use of it in mass surveillance, so that people who go out and protest are having their IDs recognized and then used against them in housing or bank loans or trying to get a job. And all of this is very secretive. There is no way of penetrating how those decisions are being made. I go in for a bank loan, I'm suddenly not getting it. Why? No, there's no human being behind it, so no human being can tell me why. It's an algorithm that somebody created. So was that because I exercised my right to free speech and criticize someone online? Or is it because I'm a woman? Or what is that about? So those are some of the very serious concerns we have, sort of looking to the future.
Yeah, and are there any parts of the world where that's becoming a particular problem, even more than it was before?
Well, here's the thing that's also interesting about AI. It's developed exclusively in the Northern Hemisphere, but it's being deployed throughout the world. And so the prejudices of the Northern Hemisphere are being used against the Southern Hemisphere in ways that people do not have control of, and nor can they hold people accountable for. And that's something that I think is so dangerous. The other thing I would say, and particularly to you at the Financial Times, I asked a series of investors what are their big concerns. And one of them said something very interesting. He said the fragility of CEOs of mid-level companies, particularly British ones, because they went through the withdrawal from the EU, Brexit, and that was so disruptive to them and to their businesses for years. And then they just got through that, and they went through COVID, and that was so disruptive. And then they didn't have the funding to put it into infrastructure to, for their companies to build, and now they have to use that infrastructure money that they might have in order to put it into AI. So they're in a lot of trouble. They're very lonely, and they're fragile. So I think that that's something that is not on the radar here, but that really needs to be on the radar.
And so that was a British chief executive who was saying that?
Actually, he was Italian, but he has a lot of investments in Britain.
Right.
But, so it was interesting because I think, that's kind of sense of compassion, sort of empathy that is so anathema to what the Trump administration is doing. And he's so dominant that it adds to people's sense of fear, of anxiety about what's going to happen next, and the structures of the future and the predictability of the future.
And of course, you've got a brother in the administration,
Yes, I do.
which must be interesting at times. But
I do. Let me just say something about my brother Bobby. I love him so much. I love him so much. I disagree with almost everything he says, and I'm very vocal about that, and I'm very vocal with him about that.
Yeah.
But I saw him over Christmas, and we skied together, we had lunch together, we had a lovely time together.
Yeah.
We just disagree on everything.
Right. So you don't talk about politics at all when you catch up?
There's really that's not going to go anywhere nice, but we have great family together, and that's what we can discuss.
I did see that you said on social media that you were going to get qualified as a carpenter so that from 2020, well, it'll be the beginning of 2029, you'd be able to climb up onto the Kennedy Center and chisel off the word Trump.
I need someone to hold the ladder.
Right.
So I'm looking for help.
How does the family feel about that? I know you've spoken about that. It's such a strange thing to see happening. But did you ever imagine that you would see something like that?
No. No. And this goes along with taking the Nobel Peace Prize, from Venezuela yesterday. The thing is that in the end, who cares about a building? But you do care about the symbolism of it. This really is the memorial to my uncle, so I do care in that sense. But to me, what's important is that kind of arrogance that then says, we don't have to feed hungry children, we don't have to give people medical care, we can round up innocent people and accuse them of terrible crimes and throw them into detention centers and leave them there for 6, 9, 10 months, 3 years, who knows how long. We can send troops into the street and kill a mother in Minneapolis. So all of these things are all part of the same thing.
Yeah. Just in our remaining seconds, what gives you cause for hope?
The human rights defenders with whom I work. Kailash Satyarthi won the Nobel Peace Prize for his work on stopping child slavery. Because of him, it was reduced from 250,000 to 250 million to 150 million over about 10 years. that's an incredible human being. You know, somebody like Malala, who's out there doing her work, somebody like you, who's a journalist, and all the people in the studio who are filming this interview. I thank you for your work, because it's hard to be a journalist now. It's one of the most dangerous jobs on earth. And people are out there doing it because you think it's important for people to be well informed.
Well, Kerry, thank you so much. Absolutely fascinating discussion, and a real pleasure to have you with us. So thank you. And that's all for this session. I'll hand back to Andrew for our final session of the day.
Hello and welcome back to the Davos Daily Show. I'm here with Azeem Azhar, author and founder of Exponential View. Welcome, Azeem. Thank you for joining us live.
It's fantastic to be here on the Magic Mountain.
So a question we've been posed